Hello, I'm Helen Bradley and welcome to this video tutorial. Today we're going to create a piece of scrapbook paper. We're going to make this a whimsical design. It's not going to be a repeating pattern. We're just going straight to a 12 by 12 sheet of scrapbook paper. Now, if you're interested in this sort of whimsical design process, I have a class at udemy.com on whimsical design in Illustrator that you might like to look at. And I've put a coupon in the description below where you can get that course for $9.99, and that's permanently $9.99. Just use that coupon and you're good to go. So let's go and create a sheet anyway so you can see what we're going to be doing. I'll click Create New and I'm going to create a 12 by 12 inch sheet of paper. This is really important because we want it to be able to be saved out of Illustrator as a sheet of scrapbook paper in JPEG format. And so if you start 12 by 12, life's going to be good. Choose RGB color mode, click Create. So my design is going to be some little squares. So I'm going to select the rectangle tool. I'll just hold the shift key as I drag out a very small square, and let's just zoom in so we can see it. We're going to fill it with a color. And while I want a stroke on it later on, I don't want the stroke now. So we're just going to remove the stroke. And that's pretty important for this process that we remove the stroke at this point. I'll just zoom back out. Now, I'm going to select my shape and just make it a little bit smaller, and I'll move it up into the top corner here. Now with it selected, I'll choose Effect, Distort and Transform, and then Transform. Again, this is not a repeating pattern. It's just a pattern-filled sheet of paper that is a whimsical design. Click Preview. I'm going to start moving this horizontally. I'll up my number of copies to probably about 30 for now. We'll need to experiment with this. And just increase the horizontal a little bit. Now I'm happy with it going off the edge of the sheet of paper. That's pretty important at this stage because we might need to move things back a little bit later on. So I'll send 3 of these boxes off the end of the sheet of paper. I have preview turned on so I can see what I'm doing. I'll click OK. Now everything is attached to this square. If we go to the appearance panel, you'll see that this is just a transform effect. We've got one square with a transform effect on it. Well, we want a second one. We'll choose Effect, Distort and Transform, and then Transform because we want to move things down. We're told by Illustrator that if we wanted to change the existing effect, we would need to click this transform here to open up the dialog and make changes to it. Or we can apply a totally new effect. And we want to apply a totally new effect. I'll click OK. Turn preview on so we can see what we're doing. Let's start at 30 for our number of copies, and let's start increasing the vertical. So I want something that looks pretty much like a grid of squares because I'm going to break that in a few minutes. I'll add another couple onto the end just to make sure that we've got plenty off the end of the page. So I'll click OK. In the appearance panel, we now have 2 transform effects. One's handling the vertical and one's handling the horizontal. We need to break these little squares out so that they're individual squares instead of a single square. Choose Object, Expand Appearance. And in the layers palette, we're going to have a heap of groups. So we've got group, 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 group. Well, while everything's still selected, we're going to ungroup them. And I'll continue to use Object Ungroup until Ungroup is no longer an option. So all I want is a set of paths in the layers palette. That's really helpful to break those out. Now everything is still selected. So now I'm going to choose Object, Transform, Transform Each. This allows me to transform each of these shapes and to do it in a random way. So I'm going to turn preview on. I'm going to turn random on. That's really important, the random bit. Now we can rotate them. So I can experiment with rotation values so that they're rotated different amounts. And you can already see on the screen that these boxes are now no longer all upright. They're all rotated somewhere between 0 and 114 degrees. The random just says to Illustrator, randomly rotate these, and this is the value that you can rotate them up to, somewhere between 0 and 138 or whatever you've put in this box. Now you don't have to use huge values here. In fact, I've totally overestimated here because at 90 degrees, the box is just going to be rotated around, so it's going to look identical. So somewhere between 0 and 90 is a good value to use. Now you can also move them. This is the rotation point. So at the moment, the rotation point of these squares is the very middle of the square. Well, you may want to make the rotation point and the change point, for example, one of the corners, now you can see that things have sort of got a bit jiggly, and it's the jiggly look that we're looking for. We want this to look whimsical. We want it to look uneven. So we can start moving them out. Now I think 0.125 of an inch is a bit too much. Once you make a document that's 12 by 12 inches, you end up having to use inches in the move dialogue. So it's a little inconvenient, but the convenience of being able to save a right-sized JPEG out of Illustrator is probably going to weigh better for you. So have a look at this right now and decide whether it's too much or not enough, and then you can just adjust these values. You could go down to 0.05 if you wanted to. That would be sort of half the movement that we've got right now. So let's just try 0.05. And you can also scale them. So what we're doing here, if I put 80% in each of these, is I'm allowing Illustrator to resize these. So some will be resized at 80% of the current size, some of them will be 100%, and there will be variations all the way from the current size, which is 100%, down to 80%. If you don't want your boxes to be rectangles, then make sure that the horizontal and vertical values are the same. They'll be scaled in that same ratio. So they're always going to be squares, they just might be smaller squares. So if we didn't use random, this is what it would look like. If we do use random, we get something more whimsical. I'll click OK. So this is the kind of whimsical pattern that we've got. We can start looking at removing things. I'm just going to grab everything. Well, I've got way too much here, so let's just grab a few bits. And I'm just going to make sure that it's taken up to the very top of the page so that my pieces are on the page. If you want them to look a little bit more like the paper's been cut out of a larger sheet, then you could move these up so that you've got little bits at the edge. Actually, I think I like that look, so I'm going to go for that. I'll start by deleting all the bits that are totally over the edge that I don't want. These are just individual shapes, so they're easy to grab and remove. I'm pressing Control or Command 0 just to zoom back out. Now I'm going to select everything, Control or Command A, and as I said earlier, I do want these to have strokes, but the best time to put a stroke on these is once you've got everything organized, not before. So let's go and find a stroke color. So I'm going to choose a sort of green color here, and let's just bump up the stroke value. Now, to save this as a sheet of scrapbook paper, I'll choose File and then Export as. Now I'm going to call this Whimsical Paper, and it's going to be saved as a JPEG. So let me just select JPEG and Whimsical Paper. At this point, if I choose Use Artboards, what's going to happen is that Illustrator is effectively going to crop this to the artboard. So I'm not going to have a larger than 12 by 12 inch sheet of paper. I'm going to have a 12 by 12 inch sheet of paper, and these bits around the edge will be cropped in the JPEG. So the only thing that's going to go out to the JPEG is what is on the artboard. So all the other bits and pieces will be dropped, and that's exactly what we want to happen. We made this a 12 by 12 document, so it would be a sheet of scrapbook paper. We'll click Export. Now this is the important part. You want a color model of RGB. You want maximum quality, particularly if you need to sell high-res images online, but if you're just using it for yourself, you might find high is sufficient. You'll want a 300 ppi. Again, if you're selling online and your site requires 300 ppi, this is where you choose it. If you're doing it for yourself, you might find that just printing on your own printer 150 ppi is sufficient, but just be aware of that and just click OK. And that's it. So now we have a sheet of 12 by 12 scrapbook paper. This is the document. It's a JPEG image. It's all been saved. It looks exactly as we wanted it to look. Now, as an added bonus, if you want to recolor this, it's really easy to do. You'll choose Select All or just press Control or Command A. There's a little icon here which is Recolor Artwork. Just select it. I'll just close up this panel so we can see what we're doing. Here are our green and red colors. Well, if you go into Edit, you get to choose your color. So you can just roll these little sliders around. You want to make sure that they're unlocked here so they don't travel together. And so you can recolor this paper as you wish. Nice and easy to do. And I like this tool because it allows me to see it in place. So I can see my recoloring as it happens. If I want to lighten it or darken it, I can just drag these sliders in or out. And when I get something that I like, I'll just click OK. Now in doing this recoloring, we have lost the original colors. So we haven't got a file that is in AI format with the original colors. So if you want to create various colorways, I suggest that after you set each set of colors, that you save this as an AI file, then go and make your changes and then save it as another AI file. So you have a AI file and a JPEG file for each color in your colorway, just in case you need to make changes to anything later on. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope you've learned things about Illustrator of which you were previously unaware. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, click the subscribe button and hit that notification bell, and we'll let you know when new videos are released. Until next time, my name's Helen Bradley. Thank you so much for joining me here at my YouTube channel.